All right. So, welcome to the regular Thursday night meeting. Thank you all for coming. Tonight, we're going to be talking about not talking to police. I'm going to go over some reasons why we should never talk to police, and then we have someone who's going to relay a situation that they had recently in regards to a police confrontation, and then we're going to talk about. We'll throw some scenarios backwards and forth. The way we're going to do this tonight is we're not going to assume that anyone has their assumed name certificate. So we're going to talk about not talking and not assume anyone has an assumed name. We're pretty much going to go at this as if you're just the average Joe walking down the street, and suddenly some police officer or other authority figure wants to interrogate you or ask you questions. So, real quick, I'm going to share my screen, and I just want to show you guys. Here it is. Share screen. All right. Share. So, can everybody see my screen? And this isn't bragging rights or anything like that. I just want you all to know that I've had my share of time in investigative work. I started out in the military back in 94, 95. I became a counterintelligence special agent. I went on to attend a lot of different interrogation courses, read technique of interview and interrogation, basic course, advanced course. I went on to do a lot of investigative work. I've probably conducted over 5,000 interviews and interrogations for various purposes, for national security to personnel security investigations to criminal. And I had a very short stint in municipal law enforcement, and then I went back into federal work where I worked for a lot of different agencies. So I'm very aware of the tricks that are played to get you to incriminate yourself so that a charge can be generated. And you need to keep in mind that if a police officer is talking to you and you're not in handcuffs, that's only because he's looking for the information to put you in handcuffs. Keep that in mind. That is their job. Their job is to get the handcuffs on you and to generate a charge. So Justice Robert Jackson has a very prestigious resume. He says, any lawyer worth his salt will tell the suspect in no uncertain terms to make no statements to the police under any circumstances. Watts versus Indiana. So this is a fellow who should know whether you're telling someone to talk to the police or not is a good idea. And he says, under no uncertain terms, any lawyer worth his salt will tell the suspect in no uncertain terms to make no statement to the police. So let's look at the difference between a question and a statement. Questions end in question marks. It's an interrogatory. Statements end in periods. Anytime you make a statement, two things are happening. Okay. Number one, you're giving jurisdiction to the asking party. They're acting as the king. That's why they call it ask king, because what do kings and queens do? They solve problems. How do they solve problems? By asking questions. There are four ways that you can handle an offer. And everything in our commercial system is an offer. From I need to see your license and registration and proof of insurance to you owe me $100 to where were you on Thursday night? Even I'm going to punch you in the face. If I say that to you, that's an offer. If I haven't done it yet, it's an offer. And there's four ways that you can handle that offer. You can be silent, which is dishonorable and makes you a debtor. We're going to talk about how silence can be used to your advantage. You can be, let's rephrase that. Being silent does not make you a debtor when there's no offer on the table. Okay. You can argue, which also is dishonorable and makes you a debtor. You can engage in unconditional acceptance, which would be if I were to say, hey, you owe me $100, and you were to say, well, here's $100. Pull $100 out of your purse or your wallet, hand me $100. And then you can conditionally accept the offer, which would be something like, hey, do you want to go to lunch? And you say, well, I conditionally accept your offer to go to lunch if you'll drive and pay. That's a conditional acceptance. Okay. And anytime you're balancing the ball backwards and forth on this, you are engaging in commerce. You are going from debtor to creditor. Okay. So as soon as someone asks you a question, they're the creditor and you're the debtor because you owe a response. Okay. Now, that doesn't mean that you owe an answer or a statement. You don't owe them a statement. I was in a scenario one time where I was in a vehicle with my wife. She had no ID on her, none. There was a very good reason for that, but we won't go into that. a police officer, because we were in a spot where it had been known for it was prostitution is a problem, became a problem in this little town that I live in a few years ago. And all of a sudden we had various ladies working the streets. And I guess the police and sheriff's department decided they were going to put a stop to it. And me and my wife at the time pulled up into a driveway off the beaten path at the top of a hill so that we could get cell phone service, because where I live is a cell phone hole. I don't get very good cell phone service. At the time, I had Verizon, and Verizon did not work at my home. So we drove to the top of the hill. We would save up our phone calls for a day or two and then go make all of our business calls. So while we're sitting there, a police officer pulls up, turns on his lights, gets out. He's got us strapped in. He walks up to me. I figure, well, I'll give him my license and stuff, and I'll just I was on private property. I should have maintained I didn't hold my stead very well. After he got done with me, he looked at her and asked her name. And I immediately said, don't answer that question. And she gave a name anyway. And he said, I need to see your ID. And she said, I don't have any ID on me. And he said, and this is the key to the story, once you give me a name, you have to prove it. Okay. Because he's thinking that's a legal name. Right. And she did indeed give a name. And if you give a name to a police officer, you're making a statement, you're making a claim, you're saying you are the name. And unless you can prove that you have proof that you can use that name, he can take you to jail for identity theft. So even giving a name to a police officer, as soon as the police officer says, what is your name? Answering that question can put you in jail if you don't know what you're doing. And I will tell you that 99.9% of all folks out there, maybe even all of them, do not know what they're doing if they're answering questions to police officers or other authority figures in the government. Let's say that a woman states that, let's say you're a guy and the police knock on your door and you open the door for them, which is a foolish thing to do. And you say, how can I help you? And they say, well, there's this woman that we've been talking to. She says that you assaulted her in the hallway of the apartment building, in the lobby downstairs or whatnot. And this is her name. Do you know this woman? And you say, I never saw her. I don't know her. Okay. Now, this goes to court. This goes to trial. They actually end up arresting you for assaulting this woman, even though they have no evidence that you assaulted her. And you just said, I never saw her. I don't know her. And it goes to court. It goes to trial. You end up at trial. And you are asked, did you make this statement that you never saw her? And they put the police officer on the stand, and the police officer says, no. When I asked him that question, he said that he did see her and he walked by her, but he only brushed up against her. He didn't actually assault her. The officer could be mistaken. The officer could be lying. Who knows? But that is evidence that could be used to put you in jail for assault. And there are many folks who have been put in jail under just such circumstances. It is impossible for you to know when the statements that you make will be used in a criminal case. You just don't know. I once had an instance where I had a federal indictment placed against me. One of the FBI agents that was on the scene had asked me something, and I said, no, I will not be answering questions. In the FBI field report that came out later, that was used in this indictment, it was said that my response was no, period. They didn't include the rest of the sentence. Was that a lie? Well, it's lying by omission. Did they do it? Yes. Could I prove otherwise? No, I couldn't. So even just saying, no, I will not answer questions can get you in trouble if you're not careful. There is no way that speaking to police will ever help you. None, zero, zip, zilch. If you understand rules of evidence, you'll know that whatever you tell the police cannot be used for you in court. They tell you anything you say can and will be used against you. What they don't say is that it can't be used for you. So it can be used against you, but it can't be used for you. If your attorney were to stand up in court and say, what my client said to the police officer is actually helps my case, Officer so-and-so, Officer Smith, can you tell the jury what my client said to you when you questioned him? The opposing attorney, the prosecuting attorney, is immediately going to say that is hearsay and it will not be allowed in court. So even if what you say helps you, it will not be permitted in court. That right there should be enough to keep your mouth shut. Okay. Um, if you are guilty or innocent, you can admit guilt without anything good in return. And people may say, well, if somebody's guilty, we want them to go to jail. Well, that's true, but give the justice system time to work. There is no rush to get what you need to say out in any situation. Just don't talk. Okay. Um, in Ohio versus Rayner, this was a 2001 case, truthful responses from an innocent witness, and I'm paraphrasing here. Truthful responses from an innocent witness may provide the government with incriminating evidence. So listen to that again. Truthful responses from an innocent witness can provide the government with incriminating evidence. So even if you're truthful and innocent and you only tell the truth and you tell the 100% of the truth, if the police cannot recall everything that you said with 100% accuracy, it can be used against you. So what if you videotape it? What if the police knock on your door and say, we'd like to talk to you about the matter, and you say, well, I only agree to talk to you if it's videotaped, and they agree to videotape it. Okay. Let's say that the police say that someone was shot, and they take you down to the station. They ask you questions. You didn't do it. You're innocent. And they say, did you shoot this person? You say, no, I never. And then it goes to court, and they actually have a jury trial. You find yourself in the middle of a jury trial, and they ask you, they ask the police officer, they say something along the lines of, Officer Smith, when you were questioning the suspect, did he say anything that brought up, that came up on your radar that seemed odd? And Officer Smith says, yeah, actually there was something that was kind of odd. He responded that he hadn't shot anyone. And I actually asked if he knew anything about a murder. I never said anything about anybody being shot. Now, whether that officer's misremembering, whether something else happened, wires got crossed, it doesn't matter. The fact that the jury is there and they hear the officer say this is not going to go well in your favor. Okay. Even if you're innocent and you only tell the truth and you don't say anything incriminating, and the whole thing is videotaped, and your answers can still be used to crucify you. Okay. If the police have any information at all that even mistaken and unreliable evidence, that anything that you said was false, even if it was true, like a witness that says you were there when you weren't, okay, that can be used against you, because you can say, well, I was nowhere near this town when this crime was committed. I wasn't there. I was off visiting a friend, but the friend is dead now, and you can't use a witness. You didn't use a credit card while you were there. And they say, well, we've got this witness, this schoolmate, who said that she saw you near this town on that night. She will be called up, and because of your statement of I was nowhere near there, they'll use that in a jury trial, and they'll use it to crucify you. Just look at Martha Stewart. Martha Stewart was being investigated for securities fraud. She actually made a statement and told police that she didn't do anything wrong. And later they put her in jail for 5 or 6 months, not because of securities fraud, but for lying to the police. What's the easiest way not to lie to the police? Don't talk to the police. Okay. So how do you handle yourself when police come to your door or approach you? Okay. And we'll get into traffic stops a little later. That's a little different. But right now, let's just say that, I had an instance where it was the very first day that Walmart was requiring masks for everyone. And I showed up at Walmart 9 o'clock that morning, and I stood in line, and I was standing there waiting to get in because they had everybody lined up, like Walmart's somewhere special to get into. And the only reason I was there is because of the mask thing. So I'm in line. Of course, I don't have a mask. The guy at the little tent that they have said you have to have a mask. I said, well, you might want to go get your manager, because you're getting ready to create a lot more liability than your hourly pay probably would cover. He comes back out and he says, you can go in. And I thought, well, that's kind of weird. So I walked in, I go through the first door, and then there's the vestibule there with the vending machines or whatever. And then as I walked in the second door, all of a sudden I found a very large police officer really close to my face. He walked right up to me. I come to a stop. Now, lucky for me, I'm used to police confrontations. I know how police operate. I was also in the military, and in the military, you are taught how to be a good debtor. When a drill sergeant gets in your face and yells at you and you have to stand there and take it, you are being trained on how to be a good debtor because you've signed up for the military. And if you are a citizen in the United States, you are in the military. You're in a democracy. That is a military. You have a military rank. You're a citizen. So this police officer, assuming that I was in the military, is in his military. He's an officer for this military, right? He gets very close to me, and I knew what he was doing. It was his attempt to get me to reach out and touch him. Because if you reach out and push back in any way, if you resist in any way, you will find your face in the cement with a knee in your back. So I simply stood at what we called parade rest when we were in the military. It's just standing with both hands behind your back. And he said, you have to have a mask on to come in here. And rather than me leaning back from him, which is what he was counting on, I leaned forward until our noses were almost touching. And I said, I don't think I do I? And we had a backwards and forth. And pretty soon he backed up. And when he backed up, I knew I was winning because I made him back up off of me, but I did not touch him. If I had reached forward with my hands and touched him, it would have been assaulting a police officer and I would have found myself in cuffs. It's really easy to get put in jail. And I hear people say things like, well, CPS wants to come talk to me. Somebody made a report. I don't know who, but I don't abuse my kids. And would it be okay if I talk to them? No, you do not ever consent to an interview. You do not ever consent to a search, ever. So people say, well, what if there's a search warrant? So let's say you hear a beating on the door and you yell, who is it? And you hear the words, it's Sheriff's Department. We have a search warrant. Open the door. What do you do? A lot of people would think, well, I opened the door, right? Wrong. My suggestion is you go to the nearest window and show them your hands. And you say, if you have a warrant, feel free to kick the door in. I don't have a weapon. I'm not armed and I will stand right here. Okay. Even if you got to open a window to do that. If they have a warrant, they will come in. If you open the door, you've just granted access. And that warrant, even if it was obtained unlawfully or without probable cause, or there was some other mix up in the obtaining of the warrant, or they did something wrong, and you could have gotten that thrown out, you won't be able to get it thrown out if you consented to the search. So when can police approach your property? Well, if you have a driveway, a sidewalk, if there's no barrier, if there's no fence, then you are inviting of public access. I live on a farm. I have fences all the way around the farm. I have no trespassing signs and I have a gate. It's a pain in the butt to open and close the gate every time I go through it, but I am disinviting of public access. The only way that a police officer could come on my property would be if he had a warrant or if he were in pursuit of a felon, or he saw someone that he knew was a felon, or he looked on my property and saw a crime being committed, right? Like somebody shooting someone to death right in the middle of the field. Then he could come on the property. But can they come on the property outside of that? No. Now, the electric company can still come on my property. As a matter of fact, I have a sign up saying that very thing. And they will even cut a chain to come in, and that's fine. They know they can do that. I also have a sign up with a phone number on it so that folks can call me if they need to on my cell phone if they're at my property. But for the most part, the folks I want to come visit me know how to get on my property. They know how to get a hold of me. They know the access code. And so I have watched police officers on my bridge. I have a bridge. You have to cross a creek in a bridge. I've watched police officers on my bridge discussing with their supervisors whether or not they could cross the locked gate. And the answer is no, unless they have probable cause or a warrant. They cannot do it. So if you have a property that's in town and you have a fence, but you have nothing that prevents walking up to the front door, you might want to reconsider that. I know if you're in an apartment or something, it's a different story, but you need to understand you are never under any obligation to answer your door. 99% of the time, if someone is at your door, especially if you live in the city, if someone is at your door and you weren't expecting them, you don't know them, it does you no good to answer the door. I've lived in some large cities, Washington, D.C., LA, Honolulu, Germany, and I had a rule. If there was a knock at my door and I wasn't expecting someone, I didn't answer the door. I didn't go look and see who it was. I didn't care because it was never good for me to answer the door. Never. It's just not. So you can save yourself a lot of trouble when I'm answering the door. Um, so at this point, I would like to introduce Andrea. Andrea had an instance here a few days back where she got a phone call from a police officer. Someone had apparently made a report and alleged that they had seen her go into a store and leave her kids in the car, a convenience store, to grab something and go back out. Whether that happened or not does not matter. But we're going to pick up in the part of the story where she got a phone call from the police officer who was asking her questions. Andrea, are you there? Well, apparently, Andrea.
Yes,
Oh,
thank you. I had to unmute and
it helps, doesn't it?
delegate some kids that may or may not comply.
We know you
Try
got.
contracting with a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old. I'm sure
Yeah.
most of you have, but there you go. That's you're the police officer in that case. And
So tell us what happened after you got the phone call.
okay, so I saw the phone call said private number, and after the encounter with the woman, I went home thinking, okay, there's an 80% chance that she will call the police. Like, I kind of saw it coming, and I knew kind of, when I saw it and it was private, I was like 50-50 on whether to answer it or not. But honestly, part of me kind of was like, okay, I want practice, but at the same time, I wasn't 100% sure that I shouldn't, because I didn't know if they would continue to follow up or not. And so I answered it, and the police officer was like, "Is this Andrea Rasmussen?" And so when I knew it was him, because only a handful of people call you and ask that right out the gate, so I knew it was him. And so that's when I went into thinking about these calls and what we've been discussing in the group. So I thought to myself, okay, the 3 things, I could only think of 3, but I was like, okay, don't make a statement, don't identify yourself, and turn the questions back on him. So I did think those. And so it's harder than you think. It's easy to defend yourself, and it's easy to kind of argue when you need to, but it's really hard to mentally reverse that. And so anyway, when he was like, "Is this Andrea Rasmussen?" I was like, "Who's asking?" And so he's like, "This is Officer so-and-so from so-and-so. Are you her?" And I don't have my ANC yet, but I, tried to think of the proper vernacular. So I was like, I felt a little bit foolish, but I was like, "I'm not her, but I'm the holder of the name." And then I was like quite comfortable after that. I was like, I did it. but it was funny because then he was like, "What does that even mean?" so
Right.
Then I was like, "Oh shit, I don't know." So sorry. But then I was like, "Well, just that." And I was like, "I'm the holder of the name, but I'm not the name. What can I do for you?" And he's like, "Well, we got a call from a lady. She said you did this. And were you there?" I don't know specifically what he asked. This is just a generalization, because details get blurry after time. And so I was just like, "Oh, because," and I was like, just kind of keeping it as neutral as possible, because I still was like, I don't know how to completely turn this around. So he's like, "So are you her?" And I was like, "No." And I don't even know he said that, but I was like, "How did you get this number?" And he's like, "Well, we pulled up your plates and it's registered to XYZ and we got this number, and so we called." And I was like, "Okay." And then he was like, so what happened?" And that kind of threw me off, and so I knew not to make a statement, but I kind of did. And I just said, "Well, a woman stuck her nose in business that wasn't wanted or needed." And then I left it at that. And so then he was like, "Well, he pressed identifying me and getting me to say my name, and I just didn't." And then finally he asked the question, and I kind of was stumped. And so I was like, "Well, I'm not comfortable answering anything else without legal," I think I said, legal representation. And then, I didn't, Yeah. Well, yeah. And then but then I didn't know if that directly meant an attorney or not. And so then I overcorrected and said a witness. And I was like, I want a third party. And he was like, well, I can just come to your house. And I was like, well, no, I have someone that I can conference in so that there's 3 people on the call. And he's like, no, I'll just come to your house. And I was like, oh shit, fine, whatever. I didn't say that, but I was like, oh, here we go. Here we go. I didn't anticipate that, like, but I was like, okay. So then I hurried and I don't know if he hung up right. He probably did. And so I immediately got a hold of John and called him because, what else was I gonna do? So and a few minutes later, not even 5 minutes, had to been a matter of 3. And I am in a split level townhome. So I was upstairs and my kids were downstairs on the couch watching a show. And so he comes to the door knocking. And so I didn't know if he was bluffing or not, and so and then my kids are like, oh, Mom, please open the door. Mom. So John, was like, don't answer the door. Don't answer the door. Do you have a screen? And I don't have a screen. So I was scrambling for ideas because I don't want to yell through the door. And so I even was like, well, I have a chain. He's like, no, don't even do that. And so I was like, oh, okay. Like, cause I don't want to be rude. I mean, I still have a natural tendency to try to be cordial. Like there's still like that programming in there, and so anyway, he's like, don't open the door, you don't answer it at all. No. I didn't know what would happen. My adrenaline's kind of kicking in at this point. So since I have a split level, I was like, okay, I'll go upstairs and speak to him through the window. It's kind of dorky, but whatever. So so I go upstairs, the window's right above the door, and I start conversing with him through the screen. And same thing, he's just like, he was not nice, but again, that's not the point because you don't know at when and what point they won't be, and that will be not used in your favor. And so he was just like, I was like, I can talk to you through here. And he's like, I need to see the kids. And I was like, okay, and John helped me, and he's like, go show them to the window and have them because I was like, okay, like I don't know exactly what he said, but he was like, I need to see them, and I need to see them.
Said I need to verify that your kids are safe.
Yeah, and he said I need to see them on my camera. And so I was like, okay. And then he mentioned that, he's like, he kept saying, and he said this throughout a couple times, you haven't done anything wrong. He kept saying that you haven't done anything wrong. You haven't done anything wrong, but and he said he was there on reasonable suspicion, but you don't know at what point, like John said, that they'll flip that, and it's not about right or wrong, and he'll flip that and it will be used in my wrong. And so I went downstairs and I took my kids to the window and they waved at him, and he saw them, and then they were eating pizza, and I'm also moving. And so my apartment is in shambles, from packing and all of that stuff too. And so then I went back upstairs and I was like, okay, you saw them, and John was, instructing me through this as well. And then he was like, okay, well, I need their names. And John said, don't give them to him. So I was like, okay, I can't give those to you, because I'm kind of awkwardly like finding my balances of being polite and also, holding my ground. And so and then he's like, I need their names for my report. And John, pointed out that his report is, and this is the thing I didn't know at all, because normally I would want to comply out of kindness, but you don't know that it's not your due diligence or whatever. So I was like, I don't feel comfortable giving them to you, and he's like, I need them for my report, and I need to verify your da 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 da. And so then he kept defaulting back to both. And so I finally just said, have a good night. And I think at one point I said, you're welcome to come back with a warrant. And then he kept saying, I'll go get my advisor. Fine, I'll just get my advisor. Okay.
Supervisor.
Supervisor. Yeah. And he's like, I'll just get my supervisor here, so I was a little intimidated that he would show up with another person and then I'd be going against 2 people, and so, and then John did say, ask him, is it illegal to not have ID?
Oh, he hit you with the you don't give me a name, I can arrest you and charge you for failure to identify. Utah has a statute for failure to
Oh,
identify. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, he did say that. And so, yeah.
So
And
do you remember the response for that when he said I can arrest you for failure to identify?
yeah, and that's when I said, is it illegal to not have identification?
Right. Am I legally obligated to
Am
have
I-
ID? Right.
oh, yeah,
Yes.
yes. And he didn't know, and he was radioing his supervisor, and that's when he kept saying, you haven't done anything wrong. And, John kept pointing out, well, I don't have to defend myself to some weird lady's claim. Like, she could have just been mad because I ran a yellow light, and she had to wait 2 seconds more. You don't know why people call. And so so he just kept saying, you haven't done anything wrong. And so I just was like, have a good night. Okay. I was like, I can't help you with your report. You're welcome to come back with a warrant, and then I was like, I'm not comfortable. Oh, and he even said to his supervisor, he's like, she's on the phone with somebody telling her what to say.
I didn't know that. I didn't hear
Yeah,
that.
yeah, he did. And so then I was like, okay, have a good night. And I think I finally just shut the window and went in. And then I went downstairs and watched him, or I watched him from there. And
Mhm.
he went in his car and he backed out and drove away.
And how did you feel then?
I was a little bit like, is he gonna come back? But
Mhm.
he was driving away so slowly that I was kind of like, I don't think he's gonna come back. I was like, I think I did it. Oh my gosh, like, what the heck just happened? And wow, like that worked, or that saved my skin.
So looking back, I mean, you did like you said early on. You said, sometimes we put ourselves in positions to try new things, and um, I'm not against that at all. I mean, you got to know what you're risking, of course, too. I was recently driving with private tags, and a sheriff's deputy was behind me, and my first thought was, "Uh-oh," and my immediate second thought was, "Well, this could result in some steep learning." And one of the things I want to point out to folks is if you have not arranged your life to where if you're arrested and put in jail, that things at your household don't get taken care of, then you need to implement some type of community support, some type of plan, some type of network to where you can take care of those things. Because when you get swept off the street and put in jail, they don't let you come home and water your pets. They don't make arrangements for your children to be babysat. They don't make arrangements for your plants to be watered, for your mortgage to get paid. They don't make arrangements for that stuff. They don't care. No arresting officer gives two craps about your life. They just know that they're arresting you and generating a charge. That's it. And they don't care about anything else. So there's no need to even tell them anything else because, my dogs will die if I don't get home. My cattle die if I don't get home to feed them and water them. They don't care. Okay. They may be kind enough to send out, animal control or CPS to get your kids, but animal control to get your dogs or CPS to get your kids, but they won't care. Like that's not going to help you avoid an arrest. Okay. And one of the things Andrea pointed out here is we are trained as debtors from the very first go from kindergarten. We're told, police officers are our friends and that we should always not tell a lie. Well, not telling a lie and being shrewd and cunning are two different things. Okay. God tells us that he sends us out into the world that we need to be as shrewd as a serpent, as wise as a serpent, and as harmless as a dove. And that's what we should strive to be. We are not here to push back against law enforcement physically, and you need to know how to handle yourself in these situations. The thing that Andrea probably could have done to stop this would be of just not to answer the phone and not to answer the door. That would have been fine. Now,
Just
would
real
that,
quickly,
yeah,
sorry.
go ahead.
One of the reasons why I answered the phone call is because where I knew what he was contacting me about was a little bit serious, I was kind of afraid that he would show up on my doorstep if he didn't get a
Mhm.
hold of me through the phone. And so
Right.
that's why I didn't just, I was on the fence as to whether I should or not, but I was like, well, I don't want him showing up on my doorstep, because then that would be, I would have opened
Now,
it.
here's a good question for you. Do you think there's anything that you could have said on that phone call that would have stopped him from showing up?
I don't know. I'm sure I don't know. That's
I
a
don't
good
think so.
question.
I don't think so. I think he was en route to your residence when he said, well, I can come to your door. I think he was.
He was, because he said that several times throughout the phone call. He
Mhm.
alluded to it, like right when I was like, oh, I'm not comfortable having this without, legal
Right.
counsel. And he's like, oh, I can just come to your house. And I was like, well, I want a witness. Like, so yeah, I think he would. And then the amount of time from when he hung up and I was flustered getting hold of you, because I wasn't sure I would be able to. I didn't have
Right.
your new phone number. And so
I got
finally
I got a Facebook Messenger message. Please call me immediately.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
so you know, one of the things to point, and this was a wonderful learning experience, and it's great that nothing bad happened. Now, if he had gotten in your home, and something folks need to understand, once you crack your door, as police officers, they are trained to stick their foot in the door. And you can't remove that foot, because if you try to, that's assault. They'll shoulder their way in and put your face on the ground. If you crack your door, they're in. Doesn't matter. Andrea told me, she said, well, I have a chain on my door. Doesn't matter. It doesn't take nothing to break one of those chains. All they have to do is stick their foot in the door, and you've just consented to a search. So keep that in mind. People think, well, I'll open the door and step out and close the door behind me. Maybe if you've got enough time to do it. But if a police officer is close to that door and he's probably already knocked, then you stepping out, he's just going to stick his foot in the door. And now, in order to get out of your door, you have to go through him. You're in a very bad spot at that point. Okay. And once you consent to a search, which is what you're doing by opening your door and him putting his foot in it, because he's already on your property. Now he's in your house. His foot is in your house and you can't remove it. Okay. The other thing is here is there's nothing that you can say that will keep police from arresting you. Okay. Nothing. No one has ever, no defense attorney has ever said later, it's a good thing my client spoke to the police. It does not happen ever. That would be an insane thing for any attorney to say. If an attorney gets a call of the police are here and they want to talk to me, it's the easiest question in the world for the attorney. Don't talk to the police, period. And one of the things that happened here is that Andrea had already been thinking on this stuff because she's been involved in our group for quite some time. And this was still difficult. She said it. She still wanted to be nice. She still wanted to answer questions. She still wanted to be a debtor. There were times when I was yelling at her, do not do this. Do not answer that question. Do not answer that question. Do not answer it. If you die on that hill, don't answer that question. Like, I was shouting it. All my dogs were all worried while I was shouting into the phone at 11 o'clock at night or 10 o'clock at night.
Really quickly, that's because it's really hard to think of a counter question, because at that time we hadn't discussed tag questions like, were you at XYZ? Was I? Because when they're asking the questions, the natural thing is to, like, thinking of deflecting a clever response. It's not thinking, give a clever question. And so it wasn't like I refrained from answering, unless I said I want, legal representation, I was, or I just, was just like, oh, have a good night, or something. But it was hard for me to think of ways to put the questions back on him. So that's where I was listening to you and agreeing, but I was also trying to think of ways to ask him questions. And that was very hard.
Yes. But you did a good job. And you win when they go away and you're not in cuffs, right? He kept saying that he had reasonable suspicion. That doesn't matter. You don't care. He kept saying, I need their information for my report. If he had gotten those children's names and yours names, he would have notified CPS, and now you would have had to deal with CPS. And the question where you asked him when he said, I can arrest you for failure to identify. And he said, and you said, am I legally obligated to have ID? That threw him off. He didn't know what to do at that point. And he just kept going back to, I need it for my report. I need it for my report. I said, tell him that's his report. He can take care of that. You're not obligated to to help anybody with the report. Imagine if I were to just randomly call you up and say, hey, give me your kid's names, social security numbers, and dates of birth. I need them for my report. Well, who the hell are you? And why are you asking me for this information? I'm not obligated to provide you with any info. So things worked out for Andrea. The fact that she wasn't arrested and she had no later confrontations means that everything worked out perfectly for her. And it was a very good learning experience. And she'll probably be a little cooler the next time that something happens that she has to talk to authorities. I'll tell you that if you're talking to police on the side of the road, if you are on your doorstep, anything that involves police, you can break it down to two questions, and it's going to feel weird when you do this, okay? Because we're trained to think of the question that the person, that the opposing person asked, and we're trained to answer that question. Okay? You're going to have to fight the urge. You can simply break it down to this: am I under arrest? And they'll say no, but sometimes they'll say, but we have cause to detain you until we figure out who you are, or until we figure this out. Simply ask the words, am I under arrest? No. Am I free to leave? Even if they say, well, you're being detained, am I free to leave? If they say no, then you can ask the question, am I under arrest? And you're going to go from one of those back to the other without ceasing, okay? Or you just stand there quietly. Standing there quietly and not saying anything is better than saying the wrong thing. And you have to stop yourself from making statements and rephrase them as questions if you're going to say anything. Okay. So real quick, we're going to bring in Ben. Ben, are you able to talk? You got to take it off mute if you're hearing me, Ben.
I don't answer questions.
There's a YouTube video that I threw out a little while back. It's a show where the guy answers his door and the police say, hey, we got a report that you assaulted this woman or whatever. And he says, I don't answer any questions. And they say, well, what is your name? And he says, I don't answer questions. Is there anything else I can help you with? And they say, well, what actually happened? And he said, well, I don't answer questions. And they say, well, is there anyone here that will answer questions? And he says, I don't answer questions. And it sounds funny. It's out of sync with what we're taught is polite conversation. But when you're talking to law enforcement or other authorities, there's no such thing as polite conversation.
The irony of that scenario is I looked into, that's from a TV show out of Australia.
Uh-huh.
And that clip was from a TV show out of Australia.
Yeah.
And that character is kind of a psychopath. And in and out of jail and for assault and stuff like that. And usually his deal is, well, they deserved it. And I've looked through, if you find that video, I forgot what the name of the show is actually, but if you look at that clip, it'll tell you the name of the show, and they've got tons of just little clips like they do from shows. And watching those clips and kind of suspending your disbelief, because his character literally is a guy that will murder somebody. But it's all good. He's kind of an anti-hero, but not really. So, but the way he answers the door, he gives a smile like he's Hannibal Lecter. He's just pleasant, but his psycho eyes, man. And the cops are just don't know what to do because he just says, I didn't ask the questions.
He actually exhibits a trait that we should actually try to exemplify when we're dealing with government, and that is to keep emotion out of it. We have to keep out our pride. We have to keep out our desire to defend ourselves. We have to keep out our anger. Anytime you're letting emotion in, it's going to drive you to make a very bad decision. You know, your desire of clearing your good name or looking for loopholes. Ben and I talked about this earlier. One of the things he said was, don't look for loopholes and don't make assumptions.
Right. This whole process is a learning process that all of us are going through, not necessarily to learn how am I going to get this ANSI thing done, fill out the right paperwork, and da da da. It's like you're trying to learn technically how to drive without actually getting in a car. So,
Yep.
Yeah, trying to learn how to drive online. So they're learning all this great information, but just like Andrea went through, when it comes time to drive the car, you've got benefit a little bit of your, what you've learned. So all that's going through your head and you're double thinking, how are you going to answer this the way I'm supposed to? Am I supposed to put it in first gear or second gear? Is this where I say this? Is this where I say these specific words? The words, when we do a scenario, like we're supposed to do a little later, the words that we use, like, when John says, am I legally, what was exactly what you said?
Am I legally obligated to have ID?
Yeah, who the hell says that? Right? Only someone that's been coached. And
Right.
you know what you're saying. Yeah, right. So Andrea, you knew what you were saying. You knew that what he was saying was right. Okay. But you hadn't practiced it and you hadn't internalized the am I obligated to have there's a law. You haven't internalized it for Andrea speak so that it comes out normal, because you're just you're the nice homebody. You're the mom, right?
Right.
You're trying to be nice. And so, but you're trying to be tricky and you think you're being tricky and you're not sure how this is going, that this is the right words to say. What we're learning is how to incorporate the principles of what the words mean. All right. And then internalize those and play out scenarios in your head. How would you use your words that mean the same thing? I mean, did you tell him, when you told him, like, well, I'm not the name, I'm the name holder and that stuff? What did he say? What the hell are you talking about, right?
Yeah,
what does that
he
even
had
mean?
no idea.
He had no idea. 99% of anybody, including officers of the court, are not lawyers. If you had an attorney, he probably wouldn't know what you're talking about.
Right.
Right? Exactly. And judges usually know, and that's when all things go crazy. But so if you know that what knowledge you have, what you're saying is true and is perfectly legal to say, you can say it without using the specific terms that we're being taught. Am I legally obligated to have ID? If the cop comes to my door, I'm going to be just as flustered as you are. This has never happened to me. So, you did nothing wrong.
She could have said at that point, what if I have no ID on me? That's not an admittance either way.
Yeah, or she could have said, am I supposed to have one? Do I have to have an ID?
Mm-hmm.
He says, well, everyone has a driver's license. Then you could say, well, I'm not driving, so am I supposed to provide one for you when you tell me to? Is that the law?
Especially considering she was in her own home.
Yeah. You're here in my home. He's technically trespassing because he doesn't have a warrant and he has no probable cause other than an anonymous phone call, which of course he probably knows all the information and is he withholding that? Well, we can't tell you who the witness is. Okay, well, the witness reported a crime. Did you see the crime? Did you actually ask him, was I there? When he asked?
Well, one of the things that she did ask at my prompting was, do you have evidence of a crime? And of course, what they'll say is, well, I'm investigating to see if there is a crime. I'm investigating. I have reasonable suspicion to believe that there might have been a crime. So what you
Oh,
have to
did you
do at
see
that
it?
point, depending on the circumstances, of course, the best thing to do would be not to talk, but you could respond with, so you have no evidence of a crime. All right. Is there anything else I can help you with today?
Right. Yeah.
I once had
Oh,
a,
okay.
go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just saying, yeah, you're looking into it. Okay, good luck.
Good luck. That's
You're
exactly right. Good luck. I had a,
you're
I had a,
dismissed.
I had a federal judge one time in a courtroom, and this is where you're on the spot and you have to speak. He asked me the question, "Are you crazy?" Now, I immediately knew that I was in a bit of a fix there because if I said yes, I was on a fast track to a state mental institution to see if I was indeed crazy. And if I said no, I would be making a claim. And how do you prove you're not crazy? By taking a mental exam by a certified doctor, psychiatrist, psychologist at a state mental institution, right? So I knew I was on the spot and I said a quick prayer. And the thing that came out of my mouth stopped me from having to go to a state mental institution. I said, "Are you qualified to render a psychiatric determination?" I could have simply said, "Are you a psychiatrist or psychologist? Can you determine that?" And the judge simply smiled and moved on. So I won that one. But there's a million ways that we can find ourselves in handcuffs, right? But there's very few ways that we can get out of it. And one of those is by not incriminating ourselves, not making statements, not giving them any more information than what they already have. Even if we're innocent, even if we haven't
could you
done
have
it.
just, yeah, could you have just said, am I?
Probably could have. Absolutely. Something Ben pointed out earlier, we were talking about this instance with the police officer in the Walmart about the masking thing. And something Ben asked me earlier was because I said, he got right up in my face and he actually said, "You have to have a mask on to come in here." And Ben said, "Did he have a mask on?" And I've had this incident in my head for a couple years now, and I never thought about it. He didn't have a mask on. And so here's an instance where I'm in this scenario because I wanted to be. I was walking into a store without a mask and I had this cop in front of me. So could I have just stood there and not spoken? Well, yeah. But at the same time, I also wanted to try my hand and see if I could get in the store without a mask. And later we'll have some calls on what to do with the ANC, the assumed name certificate, if you've registered your name, how you should handle these encounters, driving without a license, driving on private plates. But just looking at from the perspective of, the normal average person walking around, man or woman walking around, what do you do in those instances? And it would have been great if at that time I could have said, "Well, you don't have a mask on." That would have been beautiful. But I didn't think of that. It's 2 years later now. Talk about delay in thinking about a comeback, right? But uh, it's 9 o'clock. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording so that we can have our Q&A if there's anyone that has any questions. I know there was one individual who said that they would have a question.